We are continuing in our sermon series on the mile, which is the acronym our new bishop, Bishop Cedrick, has come up with as a way to center us and send us out into the world. And so we have been watching a little clip of a video from our bishop every Sunday so that we can know what he's talking about in the mile. So now we're going to hear Bishop Cedrick talk about I. Or maybe Bishop Cedrick is feeling a little tired this Sunday morning. I wanted to sleep in. I think Bishop Cedrick did too. All right. Well, while the tech team is working on getting that all squared away, I have lost. We got it. Okay, you guys are awesome.
The I for the MILE is for itineration and location. Doesn't sound all that exciting, but it will be. Because this is our opportunity to look at how we are deploying and assigning pastoral leaders across our area. This will also involve looking at how we fund or how we compensate pastoral leaders and teams. We'll also include in this some ways to incentivize and encourage congregations and ministries to collaborate in ways that they have not considered doing so before.
Well, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but you heard our bishop say that, you almost heard him say it again, that I in mile is for itineration and location. And itineration means something pretty specific, especially to pastors in the United Methodist Church. This is the word that we use to talk about how we can be called to any church in our Episcopal area. And it is our bishop who assigns us to the churches. So we don't get to pick where we serve. The bishop does that for us. And we can move at any time at the will of the bishop. And so our bishop is looking at that system and how to make it operate best for both the pastors and especially for the churches. But I didn't think you wanted to maybe hear a whole sermon on itineration. I didn't want to hear a whole sermon on itineration. So I changed, Pastor Alex and I changed to inhabit our communities. And I think it's really related, though, to the itineration and location, and I'll tell you how. So I'm not sure if the bishop would be happy about this or not. Maybe we should just not tell him. But we're going to talk about inhabiting our communities, and I will tell you how I think that relates to itineration and location. So I don't think we're going too far off track here. What is your neighborhood like? Close your eyes for a minute and imagine your home, your neighbors. What kind of street do you live on? Is it quiet and residential? A main thoroughfare? Does your street have trees planted in the yard or along the roads? Are there businesses nearby? Grocery stores? Are the streets lit at night? Do people maintain their yards and houses? In the summer and fall, is your neighborhood the kind that has produce at the bottom of people's driveways with a free, take some to enjoy sign? Or are many of the houses in your neighborhood marked with no trespassing? Or owner will shoot trespassers signs? My neighborhood is rural and has so many trees that I couldn't even begin to count them, but I can count the number of street lights on my street, and that is 0. My neighbors are great, though, about leaving porch lights on late into the night to provide some illumination. And this time of year, my neighbors are putting out Christmas lights early to start providing some extra brightness. In the summer, we often stop and pick up homegrown tomatoes or zucchinis from neighbors who have left them out for free. And sometimes I come home and find that a neighbor has left something on my porch. Lavender starts this summer, homemade cookies at Christmas. No one has yet come in while I'm not home and decorated my house. But I might offer them Q's suggestion as a way to make our neighborhood more fun. My neighborhood is a good neighborhood. We look for each other's lost dogs, and we will lend a cup of sugar or give a last-minute ride to a neighborhood child when needed. A few years ago, a new family moved in. We often, my husband and I, and when our boys were home, sometimes we could talk them into that, and sometimes Sophia, we often walk the neighborhood with our dogs. Sophia is actually now too cool to walk with her parents, but she will sometimes walk with her friend across the street. On one of our walks, as we walked past the house with the new occupants, we noticed a sign posted on numerous trees that lined the property along the road. The signs read, "The owner of this property is armed and prepared to protect life and property from criminal offense. Nothing is worth your life." I have lived in this neighborhood for 6 years now, and in that time, I don't know of a single break-in or theft. There have been some petty crimes, most likely committed by teenagers making mischief, but nothing that would warrant someone getting shot or losing their life. The posting of those signs changed our neighborhood. I told my daughter Sophia that she is no longer allowed to walk on that street with her hood up over her head. If she's out walking our dog and the dog gets loose, she's no longer allowed to go onto that neighbor's property after the dog. And if she walks the dog alone without her friend, she's not allowed to walk on that particular street at all anymore. What is your neighborhood like? What changes have you observed over the years? Who in your neighborhood is the person who will lend a cup of flour or gather your mail when you're out of town? Are there certain neighbors whose property you won't go on because you might get harmed? What kind of neighbor are you? Now we're going to shift a little bit and turn our attention away from the neighborhoods where we live and talk about this neighborhood, the East Side neighborhood of Olympia. What is this neighborhood like? We know from the reports given by people who took pilgrimages during Affinity Nights that this neighborhood is very dark at night. Our parking lot lights are some of the only illumination on Fifth Avenue after dark. Our pilgrims also noted that there are not many fruit trees around our neighborhood, although there are some gorgeous oak and maples. There aren't too many gardens either, at least not that can be seen from the street. I don't know if the soil here is poor or the shape of the lots just don't lend themselves to gardening. In talking to some of our community partners like Sidewalk before they closed and now Olympia, we know this neighborhood has great access to public transportation, which allows residents to be able to access needed resources. And we wouldn't be able to rent our Fifth Avenue house to Sidewalk when we did or to Olympia without that access because their clients would not be able to get here as many of them don't have cars. Just this week, I met with the community liaison from Madison School. Her name is Angelina. She told me that one of the struggles Madison has is providing food to families in need. This tells us that there are hungry families in the East Side neighborhood of Olympia. Many families in this neighborhood don't want to take their kids to the food bank location downtown. You might understand why if you've ever been there. There's a lot of single people who are there without kids, and it might feel dangerous. But that is the nearest food bank location. So they don't go because they don't feel safe. The only grocery store in walking distance of this neighborhood is very expensive. So the gift cards that Madison is sometimes able to give out don't go very far. Many of these families do not have reliable transportation, so they need to access the great bus service that is in this community. So food vouchers to grocery stores with better prices, they are able to get to them on the bus, but that involves packing groceries for a family on the bus while also managing children. It makes me exhausted just to think about having to do that. What other things do you notice about this neighborhood? Or have you noticed over the years you've been attending this church? Within walking distance, there is an amazing small business called Oli Malasadas. This is actually new to our neighborhood. Has anyone been there? Oh my goodness, you are missing out. They make decadent and delicious malasadas, which is a Portuguese-style donut that is also popular in Hawaii and often filled with tropical fruit flavors like guava or coconut. I will tell you, Sophia and my favorite are the guava malasadas. There's often a line. It's over on Quince and 5th. You could walk there after church. There are many small locally owned businesses within walking distance of this church. There's a salon and spa, a small restaurant, a vet specializing in cats. And it is beautiful to see so many small businesses in the area. And this is something to celebrate about this neighborhood. Another big part of the East Side neighborhood is Madison School and Avanti High School and the old Armory building, which is becoming an arts building. And of course, this church. We take up a lot of real estate in the East Side neighborhood, don't we? If you think about the church building, the parking lot, the other parking lot, the other parking lot, the empty lot, and the Fifth Avenue house, we're a pretty big neighbor in the East Side neighborhood. The bishop is inviting us to consider itineracy and location, which is largely about how pastors are appointed. But when we are appointed to a local church in a neighborhood. We are not just sent to the church itself, but to the community at large. John Wesley, founder of Methodism, once said, "The world is my parish," meaning that he was always looking beyond the pews to the people in need outside of the church walls. So Pastor Alexa and I are appointed to First United Methodist Church of Olympia, to you, and it is a joy to be appointed here. We're also appointed to the Southtown Co-op. But in reality, we are appointed to the East Side neighborhood of Olympia and to the whole South Sound region. And even more importantly, you, church, are called to this neighborhood. This is a regional church, meaning that we draw people from across the Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater area. I don't live in the East Side neighborhood. I live in the Steamboat Island area. Pastor Alexa lives in the neighborhood behind the Auto Mall. And all of us, each one of us, are called to be good neighbors in the neighborhood where we live. But we are also called to be good neighbors in this neighborhood, the East Side neighborhood of Olympia, because this is where the church is located. We are too big of a neighbor to ignore all of the people around us in the East Side. Each of you, as a church together, are called to this neighborhood. You are called to love your neighbor who lives next door to you or down the street or across the town from you. But as a church, we have a particular care and responsibility to inhabit this neighborhood with the love and grace of God. God placed this church here on the corner of Legion and 5th. God placed this church here across the street from Madison School, across the street from Avanti High School, which is the alternative high school in the Olympia School District. Madison School, and I'm sure DSK. I'm going to get caught by the students as not being cool. That happens to me all the time. My daughter always tells me I'm not cool. But Madison School has a high rate of kids who are on free and reduced lunch. We are located in this neighborhood where food is expensive and difficult to come by if you don't have private transportation. We are in a community that has a large houseless population. We are located in a place without much light after dark, with few gardens, with beautiful trees. And what else? What else would you say about this neighborhood? Anyone have something you have observed about the East Side neighborhood of Olympia? There's beautiful parks. I have no parks out where I live, and so I love driving by parks. Yeah, parks are such an asset to a neighborhood. What else about this neighborhood do you notice? Walkability, right? You can get out and walk your dog. There's great sidewalks. If you're not walking on 5th after dark, there's light. Yeah, walkability. What else? Good bike paths. There are good bike paths. Right. It is so wonderful. Almost all the time when I commute to work, there is somebody on a bike who is sharing the road with me. What a great blessing to have great bike paths. What else?
Large Catholic church.
Yeah, St. Mike's, another very large neighbor down the street. St. Mike's has an amazing clothing bank. And so it is such a blessing to know that, because when people come here looking for clothes, we have a few things on hand, but we can point them down to St. Mike's where we know they can find that resource, right? Heather had one.
There's also one on Cupid, a clothing bank on the way to Roosevelt School.
So there's another one on the way to Roosevelt School, right? You can see how in a neighborhood, all these things begin to come together, right? And work for the harmony of all of us, right? We don't have to have a clothing bank because there's two other ones. So then the question becomes, what are we called to at this time in history in this location? What do we know about this neighborhood? What do we want to learn? So I'll ask you, you don't have to say it out loud, but I'll ask you to think about that question. What are you curious about in the East Side neighborhood of Olympia? Who do you want to meet? If you could have lunch with anyone in the East Side neighborhood, who would that be? How do you want to be present and inhabit this neighborhood with faithful presence? Long before Bishop Cedrick challenged us with the mile, God challenged the Israelites to inhabit their neighborhoods, to cultivate gardens, to raise families, to build houses, to seek the welfare of the city where God had sent them. The remarkable aspect of this passage isn't so much that God calls God's people to inhabit their neighborhoods. I mean, we should know this, right? Love your neighbor is Jesus' second and co-equal, or maybe just a little bit lower than love God, right? Not much. But the welfare of the city that God is calling the people to care about in this passage is the cities of Babylon, where the Israelites are in exile. God doesn't say this, but this is the equivalent of love your enemies. In this case, though, God puts some flesh on what it means to love our enemies by saying, here's what I want you to do. Don't keep yourselves separate, but live in the community where you are. Plant gardens, build houses, marry and raise families. God is asking the people to seek the welfare of the city of their enemies by being a part of the community. It's interesting to think that God doesn't say to the Israelites, plot against those evil Babylonians, destroy their homes, shoot them if they trespass on your property, post signs that tell them you are armed and ready to defend what you own. What God says is, plant seeds, till the soil, harvest, build houses, marry your neighbors, settle in, and make this place better for generations to come. Jesus will sum this up much more succinctly later on as he says, love your neighbor as yourself and love your enemies. I invite you to start by praying for your neighborhood where you live and this neighborhood, because we inhabit this place. Ask God to help you notice where God is already at work and to listen for the stirring of your soul about how you are called, how we are called to inhabit this community and seek the welfare of our neighbor. As we do this, God says, we will find our own welfare. God is basically saying, you will be blessed as you bless those around you. And isn't this so true? That we thrive as our neighborhoods thrive? When my neighbor, whom I have to be honest about, I recognize in my own heart feels like my enemy, and I know that that means I have to love him anyway, love them. But when they hung that sign threatening violence in my neighborhood, my whole neighborhood changed. The welfare of my family changed. So too, when my neighbor plants tomato seeds and then shares the harvest in the warm days of August, the welfare of my family, my neighbors, and my neighborhood is increased. Our actions change what happens around us. And God says, as we bless, we will be blessed. And so our call is to make our neighborhoods and this neighborhood a place where people can thrive. What is God calling us to in this time and place? How are we to plant seeds of goodness in the East Side neighborhood? How is God asking us to seek the welfare of Madison students and families, Avanti students, the people who live here, the people who will visit our neighbor Olympia when they move in? What is God calling us as a church and us as individuals to do? These really are exciting questions. These questions are at the core of what it means to be church and our purpose in the world. When we take our individual spiritual gifts that Kathleen talked about last week and ask God what God is calling us to in this time and place, and we inhabit the neighborhood according to God's calling and use our spiritual gifts, there is no telling the beauty and transformation that can come. Ephesians reminds us that we were created by Jesus for good works and that we are to walk in them. This is our purpose and what we were made for. At the very core of our being, the very essence of who we were made for good works in our neighborhoods for the welfare of all people. Will we answer the call to inhabit our communities, to inhabit this neighborhood, the East Side neighborhood of Olympia, to seek the welfare of our neighbors and receive the blessings that God has for us and for all? Amen.